So this is Danny Flexen here for Seconds Out. Delighted to be joined by 258 Management's head of boxing, Will Harvey. Will, how are you?
Very well, Danny. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. It's been a crazy week so far in boxing. It may be a bit of a relief for you guys in that no one's really talking about Fury AJ anymore.
I know in every cloud, right? I think it's
Yeah,
kind of
not the way you would have wanted
deflected the
it, but,
attention off of us. Yeah, exactly.
Um,
But yeah, I'm crazy week, mate.
yeah, I mean, we saw Chris Eubank Jr. against Conor Benn get postponed. That's the official word at the moment. We'll have to see if it gets rescheduled. At very late notice on Thursday, 2 days before it was due to take place at the O2 and on the Zone pay-per-view, after adverse findings in Chris Eubank Jr.'s, not Chris Eubank Jr.'s, Conor Benn's drug testing result from VADA. What did you make of the whole situation? Because it seemed very much until right at the last minute it was still going to go ahead.
Yeah. Um, I mean, as a fan, obviously gutted. Like we had no one involved in that show, but I was going to go down there tonight. I was looking forward to watching it as a neutral. So as a fan, I was obviously gutted and shocked and couldn't quite believe what I was reading because we kind of found out about it at the same time that everybody else did. Um, I also, which is the obvious thing immediately that jumps to mind. I felt gutted, obviously, for the fighters on the undercard, particularly fighters like Ellie Scottney, for example, who she's a full-time fighter. That's her only job. She spent money on a training camp. She's dedicated 6, 7, 8 weeks making the weight, and then through no fault of her own, it's pulled from underneath her, and fundamentally she doesn't get paid, mate. Like I think Matchman done a great job, obviously rearranging everything so quickly for those undercard fighters, but that was immediately the kind of where my sympathies lay. And then yeah, obviously just gutted just for the sport in general. I think it's I'm glad that I think eventually the right decision was made. I think maybe it could have been made a bit quicker than it was. But just I have to be honest, mate, a terrible week for the sport publicly. It's never a good look. This fight was obviously transcending into a wide commercial market. The casual fans were all going to tune in on this. The numbers that I've heard that was being generated ahead of the fight were massive. And then it's laid bare for everybody to see, and what happened. And so just a real bruise for the sport this week, unfortunately. So yeah, not good at all, mate. Not good at all.
I think the issue a lot of people have, like you said about being called off too late, is that the parties were made aware of the positive test, or we can't say positive test, can we? Adverse findings, I guess, is the current term. I'm not sure which is more accurate. But the point is, September 23rd, they were made aware nearly 2 weeks before the fight itself. And not only the promoters, because they were obviously trying to find a way to still make it happen, they had a lot of money invested in it. But the Board of Control only withdrew their sanction, it appears, when this knowledge became publicly available, because they said it's not in the best interests of the sport. But they were aware of the result when everyone else was, as far as we're aware, on September 23rd.
Right. Okay. Well, I haven't heard that. If that's the case, then obviously that's incredibly disappointing to hear. I mean, I did hear there was a few different dates thrown around about when this test came up. And look, on Eubank's a fighter, yeah, and I work obviously closely with fighters. I myself would never ever if so. I was speaking to somebody about it the other day about this. For example, no matter how big the fight, how much money is on the line. And I used the example of Josh Boazzi. Say we'd had managed to make that Bivol fight, and the week of the fight, Bivol tests positive, but Boazzi stands to earn millions of pounds and have a shot at becoming a superstar. There is no way that I would ever be advising him to go into the fight because it's just not worth it. But you ask the fighters, and they don't care, mate. They will go into the fight, no problem at all. So, on Eubank's side, if they knew about it, I can understand how they would still be happy for the fight to go ahead, because Eubank, I'm not sure who's around Eubank. I don't know how much senior had been involved in terms of advising him this camp, or how much, what he'd said had kind of resonated with Junior. But I'm not surprised on Eubank's side that they were still willing for it to go ahead. The promoters obviously are financially hugely invested in it. But if that's the truth with the board and they knew about it, that's obviously really, really disappointing to hear. But that's the first I've heard. I don't know if that's confirmed, if it's just rumors or not, but I really hope that that's that's not the case, because they have a duty of care, obviously, to the fighters to sanction the fight safely. And if they knew about it and were willing to let it go ahead, that's really, really disappointing.
You mentioned Joshua Buatsi there, and there's kind of a link in that. How much of a factor was the fact that you couldn't be sure there would be VADA testing for a fight with Jean Pascal, for that fight not coming to fruition?
Yeah. Well, I mean, when I last spoke to you, Danny, I said about the Buatsi negotiations that the real deal breaker for us was that VADA testing was in the contract. We said this to Eddie from day one. We were all having communications with Pascal's side, but we made it very clear from day one that VADA testing has to be worded in the contract. The way that it was presented to us was that they agreed on email to enter VADA testing. They had, signed up and applied and done the application forms, which is fine, but they had not enrolled and were not committing contractually to enroll into the testing program. They told us that sign the contract as it is, and then we'll give you our word that we'll enroll. And for us, given Pascal's previous history, that wasn't acceptable to us. So that is the only reason the fight fell apart, because we didn't feel comfortable going into a fight without VADA testing in place. And again, maybe another slight silver lining of this is that it's more proof and evidence of actually how valuable the VADA process is in fights like this, because VADA is the only governing body that the only doping agency that's consistently catching fighters and finding out, who's doping and who's cheating. So, as we've seen this week, it's vital for us in all of these big fights that VADA testing is in place. AJ has it in place for all of his fights, for example. So on the Buatsi situation, that was the only reason why the fight fell apart, because it wasn't contracted and we weren't willing to go on a handshake with their side and trust that they would just enroll after the contracts were signed.
I think something that's been underlined, and especially to maybe the more casual fans this week, is that while VADA is a testing agency and the most reputable in the sport, they don't actually have any authoritative or punitive powers. So while, the test has been made public on this occasion, there's no obligation on the promoters or the sanctioning body to take notice of the findings. And this is the strange thing that people are going to find hard to understand, is that VADA's held up as this kind of an endorsement of a big fight. We've got VADA involved. It must be huge. It must be really important. But then a negative result comes out, or a result that doesn't fit the plans of the people involved, and it's kind of been disregarded, or it was almost disregarded.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the big learning lessons that needs to come out of this is that there needs to be a way, or it's not even finding a way. I think the British board have got to acknowledge and recognize VADA testing. But as I said earlier, VADA testing is the only agency I can see that is consistently catching fighters that are doping. So the board, I think it's imperative for them to actually recognize VADA as a reputable doping agency and recognize the results of their findings and implement them into bans under their jurisdiction. Which and fundamentally, the right decision was made. Eventually, the board, they framed it in the way that it wasn't in the best interest of the sport. However you want to put it, the fight was pulled, and that was the right decision. But as I said, that should have been done way earlier. It shouldn't have gone as close as it did to fight night before the fight actually got pulled. So the big thing for this coming out of this, for me, this whole situation of this week, is that the board have got to, I believe, acknowledge VADA testing and actually take it into account and take it on board when they're putting on these fights, because otherwise it's hard for people to understand, but it doesn't make sense that there's a system that costs $30,000 to implement for a camp, finds a negative or a positive result, yet they're not actually obliged to consider it and respect it and then implement any kind of actions on their side. So it doesn't make sense to me. So I think that's probably the big thing that needs to be changed, and hopefully the board will address that very soon.
And changing tack, you've got your Anthony Joshua baseball cap on there, so no doubting your allegiance, of course. From your point of view, and it kind of seems like old news now, as we kind of alluded to at the start, but what's the major factor or main reason why the Joshua Fury contest never came to fruition for December?
Do you know what? Firstly, I'm conscious of the worry that I have about this whole situation is that the fans actually become very bored and tired of back and forth contracts and logistics getting bogged down between promoters, and actually the fight just not happening. Like, it's almost like the boy that cried wolf. And so I'm conscious not to give it too much airtime, because I'm concerned that the fans get very, very bored of the bullshit, quote unquote, that we are trying to, whether we're explaining why this fight didn't happen. But fundamentally, it became very apparent to us that it was almost impossible so Freddie and Eddie were leading those conversations, obviously. But it became apparent to me that it was almost impossible to work to the deadlines that Fury was setting. And there's all this he said, she said. The reality is we were given 2 deadlines. We'd had the contract for 10 days or so, but again, it sounds like old news. These deals they do unfortunately and annoyingly take weeks to actually get to a place where both sides can be happy to sign contracts, particularly when you're talking about dual broadcasts and fighters that have exclusive deals with other platforms. And it just fundamentally became impossible to work to the deadlines that Fury was setting upon us. And they would, it was just, there was one day it was Monday, then he extended it to Thursday, but the reality is that it was never going to get done in time. And I just don't think, maybe we should never have really entertained it, because we were always up against it. When he called AJ out at the start of September, like, in terms of getting a deal, negotiating a deal and getting it done with enough time to promote the fight ahead of December 3rd date, was always going to be an uphill struggle. As I said to you before when we last spoke, it was never great for AJ timing wise anyway. So, maybe in hindsight, we should just, we shouldn't have entertained it as much when it was put to us, because I just feel like it was always going to be an uphill struggle. And like I said, I feel, conscious, and I'm sorry for the fans, because it seems like we just go around in circles with these conversations. We've had 2 or 3 occasions now where we tried to do this and it hasn't come off. So I can only apologize to the fans for that. The one thing I will say is this fight will happen, but it's just now probably in hindsight was not the right time for it to take place. And me, like I've said to you before, if it was in my hands, I would like to see AJ take the rest of the year off anyway. He had a hard fight in August. I don't think he needs to rush back into the ring. I'd like to see him rest, relax a bit, go on holiday, and then hit the ground running in the new year, get back into training, and then try and fight 3 times next year, maybe starting with March. I think that's the better route that we go down. Whether or not he fights in December still, that's Freddie and Eddie will decide that alongside AJ, but I would like to see him sit the rest of the year out and just take a bit of time off and relax and let himself recover properly.
Now, we mentioned Buatsi earlier in connection with the VADA testing. If the Pascal fight isn't going to happen, what is next for him? Because he's right on the cusp of that world title shot.
Yeah, he is. So we're making plans now. We're hoping to have Josh out before the end of the year, potentially around December. We're having conversations now. We're trying to maneuver him into another eliminator slot for sure. Like, unfortunately with him not taking the Pascal fight, he's been removed from the IBF rankings, but that will be addressed and he'll be back in there very shortly. But for us, it's about positioning him into eliminators now, and working back to a world title shot. Bivol versus Ramirez is in November. If we I don't know what's going to happen with Bivol, who he's going to fight after, whoever wins that fight, but that fight's always going to be there as well. Maybe we revisit that in the new year, or whenever Bivol's ready. But the aim for Josh now, which we're working through with the team, is to position him into eliminators, final eliminators, and get him that world title shot in maybe not the next fight, but certainly the fight after that. And timing wise, I think that works well for him. He gets that one more fight that Virgil wanted, and then we will look to step him into a shot early to the middle of next year.
You look after Derek Chisora as well, of course. Is he fighting Fury now? Is he stepping into AJ's shoes on December the 3rd?
We will have to see. You have to watch this space, Danny. I can't say too much about things at the moment. Dell definitely wants to fight once before the end of the year, ideally. Fury's available. It's a trilogy that I've pushed it a lot with you, and I know people would get frustrated and think that that's not the fight they want to see. It's certainly a better fight than Manuel Charr, in my opinion. So we'll have to see how it plays out. I don't want to say too much at the moment, but we'll hopefully have some news on Derek soon. Yeah.
And you've got Shannon Ryan on the all-female card next week. What do you think about that generally, the concept? It's a historic occasion.
Oh, massively. And I really respect what the WBC did with putting that the commemorative belt on the line for Queen Elizabeth. I think that's a really nice touch. So excited, mate. Really, really excited. Like you say, it's a monumentous and a really historic show. I don't know of an all-female card that's taken place before, certainly not with the attention that's on it, that there is. Sky doing a great job getting behind it and pushing it. So I'm just delighted for Shannon, who has, you know, she came into the sport late, but she's worked her arse off to get to where she's got to get the opportunities that she has. And I'm delighted that we've been able to get her onto such a historic show. It's going to be a massive week. There's going to be the eyes, you know, of the country and in the UK and in America and around the world are going to be on it. So it's a huge event, and yeah, for Shannon to be involved with that is fantastic. So I can't wait, mate. I think it's going to be great, and the card's brilliant as well, top to bottom. I think the main event and the chief support bouts, Michaela Meyer, Baumgartner, that's going to be an incredible fight. They've sold that fight really well. I'm really looking forward to seeing that. So yeah, it's going to be an amazing week, mate. I can't wait to get into it.
Any other kind of notable happenings among the 258 stable before I let you go?
Yeah, you've done a good job of actually listing them off. Listing them off now. I appreciate that. Who else have we got? Fraser's boxing November 12th in Manchester.
It's Sokolowski.
Sokolowski, yeah, we discussed him last time. Of course, Sokolowski was someone that we wanted to get him in the ring with as soon as possible. I think I've said to you before that the main focus for Fraser at the moment is to get him rounds. We think Sokolowski is the guy that can do that. He goes a distance with most fighters. So I'd love to see Fraser get, you know, at least 4 or 5 rounds in, and then maybe stop him. Maybe if you got the 6 rounds in, that'd be great. So he's doing that on the November 12th. The Birmingham show is actually now subsequently fallen through with Hugh Fury, but we had a conversation with Ben Shalom, and we decided to move Fraser to the Manchester show even before that show was cancelled. And I think with Ricky obviously being involved in that card as well and his exhibition fight, for us it seemed like a great opportunity for Fraser, because there's a lot of similarities between Fraser and Ricky in terms of their personalities and kind of the individuals that they are. So I think a lot of Ricky's fans would be fans of Fraser. He appeals to the same sort of people. So Ricky's going to sell out Manchester Arena. It's going to be a packed house full of the type of people that will be fans of Fraser. So I think from an opportunity point of view, it made much more sense. Delighted that we've got a good opponent in Sokolowski. Like I said, hopefully he gets some good rounds there. I'd like to see him box Kevin Johnson next and another 6-rounder, do some more rounds there, and then we'd look to step him up to the 8-rounders. And I've sat down with Fraser. When we first sat down and started planning out how the first part of his career is going to go, the aim that we've had is to have him be British champion within 10 fights. So I would like to see him do 1 more 6-rounder with Kevin Johnson, couple of 3 8-rounders, and then we'll go into eliminators and look to be boxing for a British title next summer, I would imagine. So that's Fraser. Ben Whittaker recovery is doing really well. He obviously got an injury after Saudi. He will probably sit out this year. I'm not looking to rush him back. You know, he's at the very start of his career. He's got a long time to go. There's no need to be, you know, rushing back when you're not fully fit. We've done that once with the Saudi card because he just didn't want to miss the opportunity. And again, in hindsight, probably that was a bit too much for him. So he's probably going to sit out the year, but he's doing very well. Recovery is going really great. So he'll be back training at full pace, probably in the next 4 weeks or so. Who else have we got? Campbell Hatton. We've got a fight date for Campbell. I don't actually know if it's been announced yet, so I better not say anything, but he's going to be fighting around November time. So keep your eyes out for that. Anthony Herrera is going to be boxing December 3rd on the Chocolatito undercard, which is going to be great. We're looking to step him up into we'll do another 6-round, but we're looking to step him up opponent wise, so he'll be boxing December 3rd. Who else have we got? And Sully Sissoko will be boxing December 17th. We are trying to make the Mbenge fight, who's the WBC number 7. Sully's moving down to 147 pounds, which I think is a much better move for him. He's going to be headlining a show in the south of France. We're hoping to try and get Matchroom involved in that show in some way, shape or form. But Sully will headline the south of France December 17th. Again, recovery for his hand. He was supposed to be fighting a Saudi, bust his hand. We've not been very lucky with injuries this year, unfortunately, but he's making a good recovery, and yeah, he'll be back boxing December 17th. And I think that is everybody you need to know about.
If you've missed anyone out, I'm sure you'll be getting a call imminently. But
yes, yeah.
Good stuff. All right. Well, really appreciate your time as always. I'm sure there'll be less eventful weeks where we can have a discussion, but I'm glad we've rounded everything up.
Yeah.
And yeah, enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thank you, Danny. Pleasure to speak as always, mate.